right, so welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Stephanie Bell, and I'll be running the session today. I teach in the Writing Center and as well as in the Professional Writing Program. Both of these are housed in the Writing Department. You can find information about courses. You can find information about courses that you can enroll in. We have lots of gen ed courses in our department that can help you build, becoming a better writer, build those types of writing skills. And then we also have our one-to-one tutoring program in the Writing Center, which I highly recommend, even if what you're doing is working on things like proofreading, because as you'll see in this workshop, I recommend that you start building a personal list of typical writing foibles that appear in your own writing. I have mine, you have yours, and that those be the things that you start proofreading first, just to kind of, proofreading can be an overwhelming experience because it seems like you have to look for so much. So if you know the types of issues that tend to crop up in your own writing, you can look for those first, clear them off your desk, and then you can read and find the other any other one-off issues that appear in your writing. So a writing tutor in a one-to-one appointment can help you to identify those types of writing foibles that are patterns in your writing, teach you those specific skills so that you can edit your own work as you are proofreading your work. So in this session, we are going to be, I am going to be teaching some grammatical rules for combining ideas in sentences. Mostly I'll be focusing on how to use commas. There is a lot that I could cover in this session. I've narrowed it down to those several rules for using commas because they will address a number of different issues across your writing. And then I recommend if you want to follow up on any other additional issues, you can ask me questions and I can try to answer them here. You can book appointments with the Writing Center to continue working with writing tutors. And I also recommend if you are a multilingual writer, if you have a number of languages at your disposal and English doesn't happen to be your first language, you can also access the ESL Open Learning Center. Maybe James, you can provide a link. And the ESL Open Learning Center offers tutoring that's more and other kinds of group conversation programs for students who are multilingual, who are studying, but also learning English as an additional language at the same time. And they'll have more specific training for that. We also in the Writing Center have a Multilingual Studio, which is a group tutoring session that is a positive space for students who are speakers of a number of different languages. There we use translanguaging pedagogy, so we encourage students to speak with each other and ask questions and try to write and read in any of the languages that they have at their disposal as they make their way into writing a final draft in English for their English professor. So the Multilingual Studio is one of the most positive and welcoming spaces that you'll find on campus for students who are plurilingual, who have that massive register of languages at their disposal.
Steph, just because there is a question that I can answer.
What?
The way for people to enroll is for them to go to our website and to register on the enroll here. Okay? And that's how you access the Multilingual Studio.
Great. Thanks, James. Yeah, jump in anytime. And feel free, anyone who's with us today, to either jump in the chat with a question or comment. James will help me field them through the session. And you can also feel free to turn on your microphone and say, excuse me, and feel free to jump in and interrupt me. I'd be more than happy to hear your voice and take your questions. So we're going to start this. We are going to get to those grammatical rules. Hopefully I can make them as clear as possible and as easy for you to walk away with confidence, being able to integrate them into your writing. I am going to ask for examples of sentences from your own writing. So if you have an essay that you're working on or an essay that you've written in the past, if you can call it up on your computer and have it available, I will be asking for you to go in and find me examples of simple sentences or sentences where you're using commas for us to workshop today. So we're going to be working with examples from your own writing. And I'll ask you to copy and paste those into the chat in a little bit when we get there. Before we get to workshopping your sentences and learning these rules for comma use, we're just going to talk very briefly about the difference between substantive editing and proofreading. When proofreading and like that focus to sentence level revision should happen in the writing process, and first and foremost, when you should be thinking about proofreading at all. So we'll start there. So when should you be worrying about sentence level revision? And I can say that a lot of students come to the Writing Center even sort of in the middle of their writing process when they're not too clear on what their argument is, asking for proofreading. They come in and say, can we edit my paper? And as writing tutors, we're often find ourselves trying to help students put those concerns about editing aside so that we can just focus on idea development. And that's because proofreading shouldn't really happen until you are 100% satisfied with the draft that you have written. I'm just going to unshare my screen for a minute if I can find the
Steph, you're muted right now.
Can everyone see this handout? So this is one of the handouts that I've provided. There's a link on the first slide of at the bottom of the first slide of the workshop slideshow. And this is one of the handouts you can access via that link. So essentially, in order to figure out if you're ready to proofread, you can go through this little map. So you start at the beginning and you start asking questions like, does my paper fulfill all the requirements of the assignment? If you're unsure, you need to go back to the assignment question and reread it and see if it fulfills all the requirements. If it doesn't, then we follow this little arrow that says no all the way down to this box that says you do not have or cannot be sure that you have a final draft or proof that is ready for proofreading. And so what you should do is keep writing. Don't worry about sentence level revision. It will be a waste of time to edit the sentences that may change substantively as you continue to research and refine your ideas. And so if you say, yes, my paper is fulfilling the requirements, then you would continue in this map, following the yes arrow to you've written your complete draft. If you've written your complete draft, then you follow yes. You have no further brainstorming, research, or clarifying to do. If the answer there is yes, you understand precisely the central points of your paper. Yes, your paper is well organized, so you've taken care of organization and flow and coherence issues. Yes, so after all of that, if you can say yes to all of those questions, then you can be sure that you have a final draft or proof that is ready to proofread. In the editing industry, there is a difference between substantive editing, which is editing for content, refining your ideas, clarifying your argument, and making everything flow and be well organized, and proofreading. Proofreading is checking over the final draft that has been finalized for any typos, issues of formatting. This is when you're going to worry about a title page, what it looks like, as well as any errors in grammar, anything that's very sentence level that's not going to impact the nature of your argument. And it's called proofreading because it is editing a proof before the proof goes to publication.
Steph,
Yeah.
we might want to clarify what writing instructors do with students because there's often a misconception that we edit or proofread. Can you go through that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. So if you have a final proof on your hand, if you're ready to hand in a paper and you just need to have someone help you read it through to identify any sentence level issues, then you can certainly come and make use of the Writing Center. Our goal is always to support you in becoming a more independent, effective writer. And so if I, in that writing session, were to take your paper and say, oh, great, so this is your final draft. Okay, it's due in an hour. You just sit there while I edit this, and then I work in silence while I revise your paper on your behalf. You would walk out of our session maybe with a paper that is more error-free, but you wouldn't walk out of that session having learned very much about how to do that for yourself. So that's not the way that we work. Instead, what we'll do is happily go through your paper and we'll read it out loud or have you read it out loud. And anytime we find ourselves stumbling over an issue, we will stop and teach that issue. We'll teach you the rule, we'll give you some examples, we'll have you try it out, then we'll go through, the rest of your paper, try to find another instance of that issue and have you revise it yourself so that you walk out of that 1 hour long session with a skill under your belt. That when you come back the next time and have another session with us, we don't necessarily need to work very hard on that, developing that skill, building that strategy with you. We can work on another thing. So that's always our goal, is to build you up and give you more. So our sessions will never be silent. And as a result of this approach, we are both working in lines with the university's policies around academic integrity, right? We are upholding your authorial ownership. You're making all the decisions about your own writing. We're not taking it off your hands. And we're also working to empower you. And that is our ultimate goal in the Writing Center, is taking the knowledge that's in my brain and helping to build it in yours. And that doesn't happen if I do the work for you. So that's our general approach. It means that we won't necessarily be able to get through like an entire 7 to 12 page paper in 1 hour session because we're stopping and teaching. So you can't expect a one session to result in a proofread paper, but you can expect us to teach you at least a few rules or skills so that you can then walk away and finish proofreading it for yourself. So proofreading happens, let me just get back to where my slides are. Okay. Sorry, skipped ahead. So proofreading happens, you should worry about sentence level revision and proofreading at the very end. And there's a difference between working at the sentence level in the earlier drafting stages and the way that you work at the sentence level in the proofreading stages. So in the earlier drafting stages, you definitely can like fiddle with your sentences, but you're doing it for a different reason. In the earlier drafting stages, you're revising your sentences in order to be more precise in the language that you're using, in order to try to figure out what exactly your topic is, like your very focused topic, what the key words are that you're using, you're refining your positions, and you're formulating that thesis statement. So if we look at this example of a sentence that's in development at the beginning of our drafting, we're going to workshop it to show how we would work at the sentence level earlier in the writing process. So the sentence is, in light of the rise of new media writing projects, I've spent the last year asking what the future of classroom writing might look like. So there are a number of ways that this can become more specific. And what we should be doing at the outset of our process is asking ourselves constantly, what do I mean by these key words that I'm using? New media writing project, what is that? Can I make that more specific with more precise terminology? What kinds of questions am I asking about the future of classroom writing? What do I mean by what it might look like? And so this gets you to be focused at the sentence level, but for the purpose of being more precise and specific with your argument and your language. at the outset. So this is the revision that we might we might end up with if we follow these types of questions. So we would shift to, in light of the rise of digital writing projects instead of new media. Now we're going to be specific by giving some examples of what that means, such as blogs, wikis, podcasts, and virtual graffiti. I might shift from the use of writing projects, which is like my framework, but other people may be more interested in not looking at these as writing, but as multimodal projects, right? So we might sub in that key term, multimodal coursework. And then in terms of what the future of writing, what we're interested in terms of the future of writing, we might say that we've been contemplating the future forms, characteristics, and purposes of future classroom writing. So this is the kind of sentence level revision that is totally fine, normal, and helpful in the beginning stages of your writing or as you're drafting. But what you should not be doing is fiddling with a sentence over and over and over to make it quote unquote perfect before you move on with your thinking, because actually that's a form of procrastination that isn't going to be very, well, it can be helpful if like what you need to do to move on is fiddle with a sentence. But if you're stuck revising over and over and over again, you're not going to move forward. And, it's really just avoiding doing the brain work of thinking, okay, what comes next? And you might end up, if you've written a full draft, you may end up going back and just deleting wholesale those sentences that you worked really hard on to edit at the first place, because maybe they weren't actually relevant in the end. So, to be an efficient writer, you need to work on making sure that you're revising your sentences while you're drafting only for precision of language, to make sure that you're being as specific as possible about your argument, but not to procrastinate, to avoid the hard brain work. And your brain does this automatically, right? As soon as you hit like, okay, I have a good flow, and then what's my next point? Next thing you know, you're on Twitter or you're on social media, because your brain's automatically trying to avoid the hard work of that task. And that can happen with proofreading. So, put a little note somewhere, a sticky note on your computer screen, stop procrastinating, move on to the next sentence. I'll fix it later. I'll fix it later. So substantive editing is finalizing your argument, the organization of your material, and proofreading is finalizing your proof that comes at the very end. And so that's what we're going to focus on for the most part, but I'll just give you another example of what substantive editing looks like. When you're substantive editing, so maybe you have a full draft and now you want to go back through and edit substantively for content, you should answer these questions. Have I answered the assignment question? You can write an excellent essay. If it's not on the assignment that you've been asked to write, you're not going to do very well. So have you answered the question? Have you clearly articulated the topic? Do I respond to all of the promises I make in the introduction? Or should I revise my introduction to edit out some of those promises, etc.? Have I clearly articulated all of my evidence? Does my organizational structure make logical sense? So you can take note of these or go back to this slide to create kind of a checklist. This is definitely a second draft checklist of things that you should do to substantively edit and revise the content of your paper. And you do this before proofreading, before you're working on, are my sentences grammatical? So it looks like this. You can take a paragraph that's like this. It's important to understand that new media represent a dramatic change. All students are now new media learners. They come to our classrooms with new media in hand, as well as with online practices and norms. In addition, students attend courses with a keen awareness of the need to develop digital skills. So when you're substantively editing, you're thinking, is this clear? Is it precise? Is it measured? Is it evidence-based? We can definitely revise to make it all of those things. You can also be working on flow and coherence in this section. So in substantive editing, so you've got transitions down. And so your revisions will look more substantive. Like, it's important to understand that new media have caused not just that they represent, but they've caused. That's more precise, right? This is a causal relationship. For all students, okay, I'm just going to focus on undergraduate students. I'm making my writing more precise. I'm making it more evidence-based. I'm integrating quotations from these sources. And I'm saying that at the end that they need a keen awareness of the need to develop digital skills for they're now required in all fields of work, right? So I'm giving more substantive information. So this is what substantive editing looks like. And generally, when students come into the Writing Center and ask us to proofread, this is the kind of revision we are going to be encouraging because you're just not ready to proofread yet. And if we were to help you proofread just for grammar and clarity, you would probably, your teacher would probably end up giving you advice like, I wasn't sure, what the topic was, or I found myself lost in the organizational structure. And so you need to prioritize how you attend to these issues in your revision process. So substantive editing will matter a lot more in the end to your grade than just proofreading, even though professors like to get out their red pen and circle all of the grammatical and word choice issues in your paper. They may just do that as they're reading and their grade is based on something else. So it's hard to figure out what they're prioritizing. Certainly working with a writing instructor throughout the process can help you attend to all of these different stages of editing. Okay, so we're going to get more interactive now. Sorry, I've just been going on and on, but we're going to focus now on proofreading to finalize that proof before you hit publish, aka submit for your professor. And so in proofreading, what you're doing is you're reviewing sentence level issues. First, you want to, as I said at the outset, consult the list of issues you tend to make in your writing. I tend to use too many exclamation marks. So I always say go through for punctuation and make it more formal. I also tend to use passive construction, right? So working with a writing tutor who can say, oh, what I'm seeing a lot is this type of thing in your writing, agreement or like pronouns that don't refer back to anything. So if you can work with someone to make a list of the foibles that you tend to make, then you'll be able to quickly go through and read to proofread for those issues that will very likely be in your paper first. And then if you run out of time and you need to hit submit, at least you've cleared up the majority of those issues that you tend to make. Who are also focusing on syntax and punctuation and reviewing for citation mechanics and for formatting. So we have other workshops on citation and mechanics as well. There's also a service in the library that you can work with a librarian. James, maybe you can let me know if the Learning Commons is still doing the citation service.
Everything's a little bit different, but the research librarians ask an expert. If you go to the website on our libraries, there's an ability to interact with a research librarian, and they do have. It's not commonly known, but they are the experts on citation at the university. They know it inside out. So I'll see if I can find that link so that you at least have a landing page for it. And
yeah, that'd be great.
For now.
Yeah, so I mean, you can work with writing tutors on citation as well. You can make an appointment and work on that. But we tend to know the citation style in the field that we write in. So I know APA in and out. I'm not as clear on Chicago or MLA. So it's useful to work with a librarian. We also have other workshops on citation. I'm not sure if we're running any more before the end of the year, but you can take advantage of that link that James is finding. In this session, in the rest of the session, what I'm going to focus on are teaching you some basic rules for writing English sentences that are clear and combining those sentences using punctuation like semicolons and commas. And if you have a piece of your writing available, get ready to, I'm going to start asking for you to find me examples that we can then workshop, and I'll workshop them in the slideshow, in the slide presentation myself. So I'm going to get out of editing mode somehow. Stop presenting. And so I'm going to workshop your sentences here. Yeah, drop your sentence sample sentences in the chat. Oh, I already have this. Okay, great. Thanks, Kristen. So before I start workshopping sentences, I'll teach a rule and then we'll workshop sentences to try to impose the rule. And I'm going to be asking for you to help me do that in the process. Okay, so before you can write grammatically with confidence that you're doing that, you need to understand the basics of an English simple sentence. And essentially, the English simple sentence has a subject, a who, a verb, which is my did here, and sometimes, often in academic writing, a what, an object. So who did what? These can be rearranged and become more complex, but a straightforward, clear, and punchy simple sentence always starts with a subject, followed immediately by the verb, the did, without interruption. There's never a comma or any words between the subject and the verb. So in our example of my academic, I always like to work with academic sentences because they're more complex than like the dog ate the bone type of examples. So here's an example from the writing that I was showing before, and then I'm going to find a sentence that you're offering, and we're going to create a simple sentence from it. Okay, so my example is the subject is in yellow, the verb is in pink, and the object is in blue. It's important to understand that new media, so that whole first phrase is our subject with, well, new media is our subject. Have caused is the verb. It's past progressive. They have caused dramatic changes for undergraduate students. Okay, what have they caused? They've caused dramatic changes. For whom? Undergraduate students. So that's the what. Often when students are being told that their writing is unclear, it's because they're trying to put the subject of the sentence at the end and they're writing their way towards the subject. So they're doing things like, undergraduate students have been encountering dramatic changes because new media have been rising. Do you see the problem here? It's leading me in kind of a complicated and convoluted. So if you are doing that, the best thing that you can do is think to yourself, do I have a clear subject? What is this sentence about? And then in order to figure out what the sentence is about, you have to think, what is doing the action, right? And who is being acted upon? So to decide between undergraduate students and new media, in this particular example, we would think, okay, well, what is causing the thing and who's being affected by that? And so new media becomes our subject because new media is the thing that's causing dramatic changes. And it's dramatically changing undergraduate students in their life. Okay, so new media is our subject. So new media have caused dramatic changes for undergraduate students. Subject, verb, object, clear, punchy, simple sentence. Because simple sentences are punchy, they're really good to use when you've been like in the midst of a convoluted, complicated explanation and you want to just hit home a point, like an argumentative insight, use a simple sentence. It'll make it stand out. Okay, so let's workshop some of the sentence examples that you guys have offered us. Let's take this one. Oh yeah, I forgot that you can't copy and paste out of Zoom chat. Now, none of this is a safe space, so none of this is judgmental, and this isn't meant to imply that this should be a simple sentence. Your sentence is incorrect if it's not. We're just practicing the skills of writing a simple sentence using real examples from your writing. Okay. So here's an example from the chat. Thank you for offering it. Nico, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Okay, so what is our, Anne, okay, thanks. What is our subject here? What is doing the action? John suggests Galati. Should always pick examples that I can pronounce. Or Venus, passive structure, Venus. So lots of people are saying Venus, right? Right. So I think Venus is the thing that is bringing to life. So that's our subject. So Venus brought Galati to life. Okay. This is at the heart here. This is a simple sentence that we can pull out of this complex sentence. Venus brought Galati to life. And then the rest of the sentence is the goddess of love. So that's Venus. Oh, this is a good example because we're going to get into these rules. While Prometheus and his creation are doomed to suffer. I'll let James answer questions about how to get the recording while I keep focusing here. Okay, so we have a complicated sentence here, a complex sentence with a couple of different ideas. If we boil it down and separate them out, you've got Venus, the goddess of love, brought Galati to life. What we're doing here is we're putting the subject first, and it goes subject, Venus, brought is our verb or did, what, Galati to life. I'm going to skip ahead in the slideshow and focus a little bit on this right here. This is called, right, Fatima, exactly. The goddess of love here is called an insertion phrase. In some cases, it's called an appositive. And I'm going to skip down to where I teach that. Here. Thanks, James. Okay, so when you have a bit of extra information, and this happens all the time in academic writing, because what we want to do in academic writing is define our terms all the time, over and over and over again. And so we're constantly wanting to insert little definitions into our sentence just to get them out of the way. They're not important, they're extra additional information. And so these are called insertion phrases. You can also look them up. You can Google appositives. Appositives are specifically definitions. Insertion phrases are more like bits of extra information. So these get plugged into simple sentences and complex sentences. But if we are sticking with the structure of a simple sentence, the who, the did, and the what, you can plug them in using punctuation on either side. So as I did in the example of Venus, and as this example is doing here, we're using commas on both sides to add extra information. So let's just read this without the addition to make sure we have a simple sentence. So I'm going to cut that out. Okay, and I'm just going to put it here so I don't lose it. Okay. Tell me if this in the chat, if you think Yes, John, I'll get to the other punctuation forms of punctuation you can use in a sec. So tell me, is this a full, complete sentence? Students need to develop digital skills and literacies, even though they can be considered digital natives. Is this a full sentence, a complete sentence? Does it have a who, a did, and a what? For the most part, yes. Yeah. So all you need to do is check, does it have a who, a did, and a what? What's the who? Students. What's the did? Need to. Right. Students are who, need to is did, and the what is all the rest of the sentence. Develop digital skills and literacies, even though they, meaning students, can be considered digital natives. Okay. So now that we know that we have a full sentence, we can grammatically insert extra information. So we have extra information about digital skills. So this extra information in purple is actually modifying this here. It's sort of defining what digital skills are. Oh wait, digital skills, sorry, and literacies. What are digital skills and literacies? So we want to just drop a little definition in, which we always want to do in academic writing, is define our terms. So we put it here. Okay, but because it's additional information and we can remove it and still be left with a full sentence, we need to punctuate it. If you can move it or remove it, you need to punctuate it. All right, so we could put commas on either side. You need to punctuate both sides of extra information that you're inserting. We could put commas. As Don pointed out, we can also put dashes. We can also do parentheses or brackets. Okay, these mean different things. So if you want to use commas, you're communicating to your reader that the information is the same level of importance as the rest of the sentence. And so in your head, the reader would read this like this. Students need to develop digital skills and literacies, the ability to use tools effectively and be critical consumers and producers of online content, even though they can be considered digital natives. Okay, pretty straightforward. Brackets communicate, this really is not important. You don't need to pay attention to this. And so this is why when you're reading, especially textbook material, and you see something in brackets, you typically don't read it, right? You skip over it. You're like, oh, great, a few less words for me to have to read. And so the information's muted. So it would be students need to develop digital skills and literacies, the ability, yada, yada, even though they can be, okay? Dashes emphasize things. They make them really important and prominent in a sentence. Students need to develop digital skills and literacies. The ability to use tools effectively and be critical consumers and producers of online content, even though they can be considered digital natives. So the things that you need to remember when you're inserting additional information is that it is extra non-essential information to your sentence. So if you take it out, you're left with a complete sentence. That was the first thing that we did, right? We took it out. Do we have a full sentence? Yes. We can put in extra information. The second thing is you need to make sure that, yes, Fatima, brackets mute the information and make it not essential, like not important at all. The second thing that you need to know is you need to drop the additional information right after the thing that it's clarifying. So you can see that I put this right after digital skills and literacies because it's modifying, it's giving a definition of that. So it would make no sense for me to put this at the end of the sentence in a dash like this, like if I did this. So if I took this and put it at the end of the sentence, let me stick a comma here, add this on, put a period. It just would make no sense because right now, if I did that, the ability is automatically, just grammatically modifying digital native. And it's not. A digital native isn't an ability, it's a person. I mean, if you're okay with using that term, you might actually qualify this, right? The term used to describe individuals who have grown up with computer tech, whatever, right? So your additional information can go anywhere in the sentence. It can go at the end, it can go in the middle, it can go right after the subject. But the way that you decide is if it is what it's modifying. Does that make sense? So you have to put it right after what it's modifying. Okay, I have a few questions here. John, what about the use of parentheses instead of commas? So, sorry, commas just make it like normal. You should read this, but, and parentheses, which are brackets. Yeah, brackets and parentheses are used interchangeably. It's synonym. So the parentheses just mute the information. One thing that you absolutely should not do is use a colon and a comma. The rule is you have to use the same punctuation on both sides. You can't use a dash and a comma or a dash and a bracket, right? It's got to be the same on both sides so that the reader knows that they can pick that piece of extra information up and take it out and read a full sentence. A colon means look at what's after. This is modifying what comes after, right? It introduces like a list or something. So if you were to try to use it on both sides, it would make no sense, right? Skills and digital literacies, the ability, and then the even though would have to refer back to producers of online content. It makes no sense. So that's why you can't use colons here. You want to use the same, you want brackets or parentheses, commas and dashes, and just be consistent. They have to be the same on both sides. So that's how you insert additional information. And you can see that knowing, you have to be able to check that you have a full sentence if you take it out. And in order to do that, you need to be able to identify the subject, the verb, and then the predicate of the sentence or the object, the rest of the sentence. In terms of formality, the preference is to be pretty boring in tone. And so I would say the most common thing would be a comma, that you would use commas. You would reserve dashes for the most important moments. If you're using dashes all the time, it's kind of like using all caps, right? It's just like you're shouting at me. Parentheses is really when it doesn't matter. And if it doesn't matter, then the academic reader usually is like, well, why are you putting this in here anyways? Like, because they are so interested in concision that like, just take it out if it doesn't matter. So that's why there's a preference for commas, but you can choose, okay? Good question, thank you. All right, so let's move on to combining two simple sentences together using a comma and what's called a coordinating conjunction. The way that you can remember coordinating conjunctions is with this, what's it, mnemonic? Fanboys. Fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. So these are your options for combining two sentences together. So we have the who did what on one side, a comma, one of these coordinating conjunctions you pick based on the relationship. And then on the other side, you would have another simple sentence, a who, a did, and a what. Okay, so here's our two sentences, and then I've combined them. Students have a keen awareness of the need to develop digital skills, right? Who did what? Students. Have is our did. What do they have? A keen awareness. Okay, so we have a who, a did, and a what. That's a simple sentence. That's a full sentence. Our second full sentence, digital skills are now required in all fields of work. Do we have a who, a did, and a what? Digital skills is our subject, our who. Our now is our verb, our did, and required in all fields of work.
Steph, you have a question.
Yeah.
It's from John.
Don't apologize for asking questions, John. I don't, let me get to that in a minute, okay? So, I mean, the rule is if you're going to use one of these words as a transition, like an introductory phrase, like but, comma, you have to have a full sentence after it, right? But digital skills are now required in all fields of work. You can definitely do that. Because what makes it okay is that you have this complete sentence. But I wouldn't really recommend it because you can run into trouble. So if you get comments on your papers that are like lack of clarity, just avoid breaking the rules. just try to be safe. So that's why I don't really want to recommend it. Okay, so in order to combine these two sentences, because they're definitely related, students have a keen awareness of this need, and these skills are now required, right? Yes, good one. So we would combine them by choosing one of these coordinating conjunctions. So students have a keen awareness of the need to develop digital skills, comma, for, right? This is our relationship for digital skills are now required in all fields of work. Does that make sense? So we have two complete sentences, and in order to combine them into a complex sentence that has two or more ideas, we need both a comma and a coordinating conjunction. Okay, question for the group. What if I wanted to say because? Would I need a comma? Yes or no in the chat. If I want to put because where this for is, right here. So most people are saying no. Some people are on the fence. Both are acceptable, you guess. You see it in academic texts. You know, not academics are grammatical writers. Especially English lit profs. You hear the truth here. Okay, you don't need a comma when you're using because. Because is not a coordinating conjunction. It's just a relationship word. And the way that I was taught, you can think of because as kind of strong arming the two sentences together. He's like, you know, a little warrior, like holding the two of them together really strong. Whereas the fanboy conjunctions, they require the comma to help them. Does that make sense? Go ahead, John. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so is I see. Yeah, well, these words, it is complicated because these words can take on different roles in your writing, right? If we used, let's say we had digital skills as our first sentence. Okay, digital skills are now required in all fields of work. And then we have students have a keen awareness of the need to develop digital skills. Let's say we wanted to use so as like an introductory transition word. So students have a keen awareness. You can absolutely do it like that, but it's just not acting as a coordinating conjunction in that sentence. Like these words, just because just because they are coordinating conjunctions and can act this way doesn't mean they can't act in other ways. Okay? But it can be really useful. So if you have a complicated sentence, and it's got two sentences and you're trying to combine them both, then when you're proofreading, you can use this to check that you've done it right. You can say, do I have a full sentence? Who did and what? Do I have another full sentence? Who did and what? Do I have a comma and for and nor but or yet or so? Alternatively, you could have because. Does that make sense? You cannot have however between them. You can't do this. You need to have a full stop. However is not a word that combines things. It separates them. Oh, I thought you were yeah, my knee started hurting, so I stopped running. I was lost, so I bought a street map. Right. Let's just look at that one. I was lost, so I bought a street map. I was lost, so I bought a street map. This is two sentences. I was lost. Subject, who, was is the verb, and lost. You could put a period here. So you could revise it this way. So I bought a street map. I bought a street map. I, subject, bought, verb, object, a street map. Okay? You can also combine it like this. I was lost, so I bought a street map. That's using coordinating conjunction, coordination and coordinating conjunction. So I bought a street map. You need both of them. Well, language is always in flux. And what we're doing in academia is using academic English. So the Oxford English Dictionary isn't necessarily reflecting expectations of your professors, right? So we're using like these extraordinarily formal rules. Oh yeah, sorry, Cambridge Dictionary, yeah. I mean, if you were to say, have a sentence that was this simple in your essay and you didn't have a comma, I'm not sure you would lose marks. But in general, in academic writing, we are combining one sentence that has a long-ish predicate with complicated academic words and jargon with another one that is the same. And we need to construct clarity by sort of appealing to these formalities of sentence combining. Does that make sense? Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to move on just because we're running out of time, and go to the way that you can write a single sentence, but rearrange it using a comma so that you're placing emphasis on the most important part of the sentence. And this is a very common sentence strategy in thesis statement writing. So it's called subordination if you wanted to Google it. I'll just write it in the chat. And what you're doing here is you're taking a sentence. You can see I've kind of rearranged it, and you're putting the end of the sentence first, and that causes you to introduce a comma, and you're using what's called a subordinating conjunction. So subordinating conjunctions are words like despite, or even though, or although, or, because, right? You can start a sentence with because, but you have to have a comma with the first half of the sentence that was there. So if we take a sentence like this, students need to develop digital skills and literacies even though they can be considered digital natives. And we flip it on its head so that we're placing emphasis on the students need to develop digital skills and literacies part. We need to introduce a comma into the sentence. So we flip it, even though we start with the subordinating conjunction, even though they are sometimes thought to be digital natives, comma, students need to develop digital skills and literacies. Does that make sense to everyone? So if you were to have a sentence, has anyone been taught that they can't start a sentence with because? Just let me know in the chat. Yeah. Some people, a lot of people. You definitely can. It's just that because is one of these subordinating conjunctions. So you can start your sentence with because, but you need to have the second half. This is a good question about the comma and that I'm going to get to in a minute. So because they're sometimes thought to be digital natives, students aren't typically taught computer literacies. Okay, just to make the context make sense here, I'll just give this some breathing space so that we can see it. So because is one of these subordinating conjunctions, and the reason why people are often told that they can't use it at the beginning of a sentence is because they typically forget to include this half of the sentence. So if you were to put a period here and not have that, because they are sometimes thought to be digital natives, you just don't have a full sentence. Because you're starting your sentence with a subordinating a conjunction, so a conjunction that's supposed to connect two things. And so you need to have the other thing that it's connecting to, right? And that, so you can definitely, it's formal writing to start a sentence with because you just need to do it grammatically. Okay, Anastasia asks, can we use passive voice in academic writing? You definitely can. It can get you into some pretty messy writing situations. So let me just give an example, duplicate this. Sorry, let me just clear some space to make this passive. So passive conjunction is when you put the thing that's being acted upon at the beginning and you write towards the subject. Okay, so you could do something like, oh gosh, it's so hard to do this. I am so untrained to write passive construction that it's really hard to come up with examples. Okay, computer literacies are not developed by digital natives. All right, so the thing that should be doing the action here is digital natives who should be developing computer literacies, right? So the reason why passive construction gets us into trouble is it makes it really hard to identify the who, the did, and the what, so that when we go to combine sentences together using commas or other punctuation, we can't quite make sense of where our sentences, our full sentences begin and end. So it can be really difficult to know that that this is the place where we would put, for da 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 da, the rest of the next sentence. Same with like computer literacies are not developed by digital natives, even though they should, even though they do most of their work on computers. This topic is so out of date, sorry. Okay, so because computer literacy is here is in our subject position, this they, which is referring, it's a pronoun, it's referring back to the subject, is referring back to computer literacies rather than digital natives, which it should be modifying, right? So now we end up kind of in a pickle because our sentence has become ungrammatical. What we should have is this, even though, oops, sorry, even though they do most of their work. Need to develop computer literacies on computers. So here, this they is now referring back to digital natives because it's in the subject position. So my answer, Anastasia, is in some cases, if you want to, like use a simple sentence, there's nothing wrong with, it's not ungrammatical to say computer literacies are not developed by digital natives. So if you want to have a straightforward, simple sentence that is connecting two ideas, maybe you were just talking about computer literacies and you're writing towards digital natives or something, you can use that passive construction to bridge that transition. Totally fine. But if you then go and try to revise that sentence to make it more complex, to add other elements to it, you're probably going to end up in a position where you're introducing grammatical issues because of that passive construction. So if you're the kind of writer who tends to get like comments on your paper, like, your professors say you have great ideas, your writing's just not very clear, try to avoid passive construction. It's just one of those things that when you feel more confident in the clarity of your writing, that you can then start to use it. But in general, that's why people recommend that you avoid it. Okay. What about while, whereas in the middle of a sentence? Do we need to use a comma before these words? Because I see that sometimes, and other times they do not. Okay. In some cases, John, while, whereas are being used in the middle of a sentence, like even though, right? Oh, I should have kept my not passive construction. Sorry. So in some cases, you have the even though, you can do this. So it's being used like a subordinating conjunction there, okay? And that's totally fine, no comma necessary. Unless you want to do the subordinating conjunction trick of emphasizing that one part and move and rearrange and introduce a comma. So you could say this, while they do most of their work, oh gosh, sorry, on computers, comma, digital natives need to develop computer literacies. So you can see it's functioning just like even though was. If you want to use while in an addition, in an insertion phrase, like we were talking about before, then you need the comma before it, okay? So something like, oh gosh, coming up with sentences. Digital natives need to develop computer literacies. Let's use dashes. Let's pretend these are M dashes, okay? Because these literacies are required in the working world. Something like this. It's not a perfect example, but generally when you're seeing them, punctuation used before them, yeah, exactly. You eat a huge plate of food for lunch. You could put a period and then you can have, I have just a sandwich. That's additional information. So that's just an insertion that's happening at the end of your sentence. Yeah, got it? Great, thanks for helping me out with an example. Okay, so let's jump, where am I? We did this. Oh, thanks to the dictionary. Let's talk about semicolons. Semicolons are really interesting because they can be used in two different ways as two different kinds of punctuation. So they can be used as super commas. And this is typically what we're taught, that they are commas. Does that make sense? Have people heard that? No? So where they are used as commas is in a list. All right. So if you have a complicated list here, let me use this sentence with list item 1, and then this is list item 2, and then semicolon, list item 3. Okay, you see? The reason why you would use semicolons this way to separate list items is if your list items have internal commas. So if you want to do something like, I work with many stellar colleagues, including James Robertson, the Writing Center coordinator, Andrea McKenzie, the Writing Center director, and Kim I always spell his name wrong. And Kim M.
Michasiw. ASIW.
Thank you. The department chair. Okay. So here I have a list. I have a list of 3. James Robertson, Andrea, and Kim. The problem here is that it's very difficult to see that these are my actual list items because it looks like I also have additional list items, including the Writing Center coordinator, the Writing Center director, and the department chair. And so introducing semicolons, see, I'm going to change this comma to a semicolon and this comma to a semicolon, will show that this actually is one unit, right? That's list item number 1. This second thing, Andrea is the Writing Center director and Kim is the department chair. So that's how the semicolon is a super comma because it's acting as a comma in this complicated list. But it's clarifying which items go with each other. That's only one way that you can use a semicolon. You can also use a semicolon as a super full stop, or colloquially known as a period. So in this case, we go back to our understanding of a simple sentence, who, did, and what, subject, verb, object. We make sure that we have 2 simple sentences on both sides of a semicolon. All right, so instead of putting a period, right, we could put, this could be a period. Instead, we put a semicolon. And the reason we do that is we want our reader to understand that these 2 sentences are deeply connected to one another. So use this only rarely. So for instance, all students are now new media learners, semicolon. Not only do they come to our classrooms with smartphones, tablets, and laptops in hand, but they also arrive with practices and norms for participating in online content creation. Does this make sense, using semicolons as periods?
You have a question in chat from Tim.
Sure. Tim, this is the title of a book, The Hakka Odyssey, Identity, Culture, and Beyond. Is it correct? Grammatically, yes. You've got the colon showing what the nature of the contents of the book are, and the commas are separating the list items. Never grammatically correct a direct quote that you're taking from somewhere. Even if you're like, haha, I found an issue. Why is there a comma after culture? Oh, the Oxford comma. So yeah, there is this comma, the Oxford comma. See, I do it right here, Pin. I always put commas between every list item, including between the last list item and the one that comes before it. And the reason is if we take that out, then it could imply that we are defining, in this instance, the list item before it. So in this items, it looks like smartphones could be comprised of tablets and laptops. And so we want to make sure that we're clear that this, what's called the Oxford comma, is telling us that this is a list of 3 items, not one item with some clarifying information after it. I would say, Dia, yes, use the Oxford comma. Just there's no reason not to, but you could run into trouble by not doing it. So just use it. Yes, John, you can use for example at the end of a sentence like that. If you can move it or remove it, punctuate it. So you've punctuated that because the for example can be removed altogether, right? It's not impacting. And really it's just up to you in terms of flow. So if you want to have, for example, at the beginning of that sentence, because it helps to contextualize the information for the reader, like, oh, now I'm reading an example, then you would put it at the beginning. But if this to me just reads, I read it without feeling confused and was like, oh, for example, yeah, okay. So I would say that's both grammatically correct and it flows pretty well. Okay, so yeah, thank you, Deborah, for reminding me of this. So Deborah's been asking about where punctuation goes at the end of quotations. So you can see here that this semicolon is after the outside of the quotation marks there. And that's pretty typical for semicolons that they go outside the quotation marks. Where was the example of the, here? Okay, so we've got digital natives here and I've put the punctuation inside. So if this phrase digital native was coming from a book and I needed to cite it, then I would remove the punctuation and let's say the book was by, sorry. Then the punctuation would go like this. If digital natives was a quote and the quote ended in punctuation like an exclamation point or a question mark, then you would include the question mark and still have a period at the end outside of the brackets like that. If digital natives is not a quotation, it's just I'm putting that in scare quotes because I want to trouble that term, which I do, then I would put the comma or the period inside. Why? I think because that's the style guide in APA, that's what's recommended. You'd want to look up the style guide. It's a, you know, like it. I think this is something that's dictated in these style guides, and it changes between Chicago MLA, IEEE, and APA. If anyone has additional information about that, let us know. Okay, one second, let me see. Dia, what about punctuations when writing dialogue within quotation? Oh, Dia. Okay, so if you're an English lit person and you're writing dialogue within quotations, then my answer is I don't really know. I think, Dia, what I would say is you need to Google that and say in MLA. When writing dialogue within quotations, it differs between style guides. Like if you're quoting also, it's difficult because how do you represent things like line breaks when you're quoting poetry? You know, do you use slashes or do you use line breaks yourself? All of this is like, it changes from style guide iteration to style guide iteration. So I haven't studied English Lit in so long. I couldn't tell you what the most recent style guide says. And these are probably great questions for so if you're the author of a short story and you want to write dialogue,
Yes.
well, you get to make those decisions.
Oh, yay.
Especially if what you're writing is kind of poetic, but also if you're working with a publisher, they will probably dictate and impose a style on you. And then you get to say things like, I've made this stylistic choice for a reason.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So Carol still has questions about while and however. Here's your sentence. While both Frankenstein and Pygmalion make obvious intertext connection with Greek myths, one mainly referring to Prometheus by subtitle of the story, or, okay, this is an excellent, oh man, why can't you copy and paste? So frustrating. Okay. Carol, I'm gonna edit your sentence, okay? I still have, oh, wait, not that sentence. While both Frankenstein and Pygmalion make obvious intertext connections, I'm gonna say, with Greek myths, one mainly referring to Prometheus by the subtitle of the story. Frankenstein or the modern Prometheus. The other solely related to the myth of Pygmalion and Galatea only. Moreover, both are Ovid's metamorphoses. However, both stories' endings are diverted from their origins. Okay, great. Sorry, Ovid. All right, so Carol, I would say that even though this is all related, you probably have enough material here to be kind to your reader and introduce some periods, some full stops. Just to help take them by the hand and clarify your ideas, okay? What you do have, like the structure that you're working with here, is more like this. What you have is an extremely long insertion phrase. So all of the stuff that I've put in brackets is inserted into the sentence. So if we take it out, you should be left with a full sentence. Does that make sense, Carol? Okay, so when we take it out, don't you feel a sigh of relief? Like, oh, wow, that's so much clearer. So while both Frankenstein and Pygmalion make obvious intertext connections with Greek myths, You can take out however because you have while. So you're kind of doing double duty with both of these things. Okay. Both stories' endings are diverted from their original myths. So this, you're using subordination with a subordinating conjunction at the outset. So we could rewrite this as both Frankenstein and Pygmalion's endings are diverted from their original myths, while they both make obvious intertextual connections with other Greek myths. Okay, so these sentences are both saying the same thing. What you've done is used a subordinating conjunction to flip it so that you're putting the emphasis on the second half of the sentence that I've just bolded, which is an argumentative way of communicating this sentence. Perfectly fine. The issue that I had as your reader was you had inserted a bunch of evidence in this additional information slot, and I just kind of got lost in it. And then I forgot what the beginning of your sentence was by the time I got to the end. And so I would just recommend pulling the evidence out of that statement and saying, you can just have it, one mainly refers to Prometheus by the subtitle of the story, and that's the subtitle, right? While the other solely relates to the myth of Pygmalion and Galatea. Solely does the job of only, so I'll take that out. And then here, did someone say this? I would put a full stop because you've got another piece of information. So you can use a period or a semicolon to imply that you're kind of continuing that thought. It's a full stop though. Moreover, both is your subject, are is your verb or your did, and then Ovid's Metamorphoses is the object of that sentence. So this is the grammatical revision of your sentence. Does anyone have questions about the changes that I made to that? Okay. Oh, thanks for. Oh, I can change the setting in Zoom so I can copy and paste from the chat. Oh man, okay, I'm saving this. Oh, I can't copy and paste. I'm gonna screenshot that.
Yeah, I think you'd have to do it at the creation of it. We're gonna discover how to do that because that's a tool that I've wanted several times.
Yeah, thanks so much for that information, John. Okay, so I'm just going to we've come to the end of our time, so I'm just going to reiterate these.
Yes,
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Okay, I don't know if. Okay, so I'm just gonna review these, but I hope that I've shown you that the simple sentence, the who, the did, and the what, knowing that is key to being able to revise your sentences and make them grammatically clear. So simple sentence is who, did, and what, subject, verb, and object, or the rest of your sentence there. You can combine two simple sentences using a comma and one of these coordinating conjunctions, which you can remember by fanboys. If you want to use because, it's not a coordinating conjunction, it's like a muscle man, and you don't need the comma, it just holds them together. If you want to use however, you have to put a period before it. It's not a conjunction. It doesn't connect things. It just offsets them. However, and it starts a new sentence. Okay. You can use subordination to flip a sentence on its head so that you're emphasizing the last, and you need to use a subordination, subordinating conjunction. Those are things like despite, even though, because, while, or whereas. And you can insert additional information using either commas on both sides, em dashes on both sides, or brackets, parentheses on both sides. Be consistent with how you're introducing those and make sure that they go right after the thing that's being modified. You can use semicolons in between complicated list items as commas, and you can use semicolons as periods in between two full sentences. So you need to go back to what is a full sentence, the who, the did, and the what, and make sure you have that on both sides. And I'll stick around and answer some more questions if you'd like, but I'll just leave you with this one last piece of advice, which is that when you go to proofread, you need to make sure that you're not going to be reading what you think you've said or written. And so in order to do that, you need to get some critical distance from your draft. So I would recommend pretending like your assignment is due 2 days before the actual due date, especially with those really big ones. Maybe not all of them. Get the assignment done, even if you have to stay up all night to get it done 2 days before. Take a day off and don't think about it. Go to the movie. Well, who are we kidding? Watch a movie on Netflix. Go for a walk outside. Work on other work if that's what you have. Have some fun. I don't know. Don't think about that assignment. Then the next day, the day before it's due or the morning it's due, you print it off and read it. And trust me, you will go, what was I thinking here? Or why did I write that? Because all of a sudden you're going to be reading it with what we call critical distance. And you're going to have the kind of outside perspective that you have when you get your assignments passed back to you. And you read it and you're like, why did I get that grade? And then you start reading and you're like, oh, what was I thinking when I handed this in? Or all of a sudden you can see all of it. You want to just have that experience before you submit it. So get that critical distance before you go. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Please remember that you can go to the Writing Center's website to book individualized sessions with people like myself. And I'll stick around for another few minutes if you have additional questions.
Can I ask a question, Professor?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for this session. It was really, really helpful, especially in terms of like punctuation. I was confused at some point, so thank you very much. So my question is about if you can recommend a good book that you really trust on punctuation rules or on grammar rules that we can use like as like reference books.
Yeah. Actually, I can't, but maybe I wonder if some of the professors in our department could. James, do you think you can survey our faculty and ask for some suggestions that we can then send to John?
John, what I'd suggest is email me your question. I'm going to send it out to our group of instructors. Most of the writing instructors kind of have a reflexive dislike of anything that has to do with an axiomatic response to all things. They tend to look at things as kind of more organic in nature. I can see Stephanie smiling. That's probably what's going to happen. But if there is any sort of book, I will send it back to you. Okay?
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Sure.
John, I'll also point you to this handout that I have on the screen that I'm sharing. It's linked to from the slides, and I'll stick the link in the chat here. And it's a handout that I've crafted with a team of TAs at the Writing Center over the last few years, and it goes through all of these things that I've said with additional examples. Okay, so you can refer back to this, though it's not like a comprehensive guide by any stretch of the term. So I'll send this to everyone. Why can I not send to everyone there? Okay. There you go. And this is a stable link. I don't take this down. You're very welcome. Thanks for your helpful questions and input, actually. If you're citing and you're using quotations, I recommend OWL at Purdue. You can see me, I'll Google it now, OWL Purdue, and you can put in MLA or APA. This is a formatting style guide, like access to the style guide that is detailed. They have sample papers. I highly recommend it. Also use that library resource, contact the librarians. They can be very helpful. One thing that that OWL at Purdue has is sample papers. So a sample paper and sample works cited page, they have this for MLA and APA. And I find that really helpful. If you kind of get overwhelmed with trying to find different things in the style guide. Thanks, John. Have a good day too.
I have a quick question if I can.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Okay, maybe even Jax can answer that. So some instructor, like semicolons, some, some will use brackets, some use dashes. And I find that when I go, I go to different ones, when you get to know people that you feel comfortable, but, so I get used to doing the semicolon or brackets, and then I go to another one. No. Like, don't use that so much. They're not happy with it. Or stop using ing so much, and where another instructor says, no, this is good. So sometimes I'm a little bit lost, who is right? I mean, a lot of the time I end up listening to myself, and if I feel comfortable with it, I do it.
Yeah.
But how do you someone like me that is not an expert in the English language, how do you know who to at the end of the day? I mean, they're all knowledgeable, they're all professor, they all know what they're doing. Who do you listen to? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just a comment. It's not, you may not have the answer for me. I'm just putting it out there.
Well, what I have for you is empathy. As this is a common experience, and it's common not just for rules of grammar and syntax, and punctuation. It's also common for citation style, or how you're supposed to be formatting your paper. Do you need a title page? Or it does vary from professor to professor what their expectations are. So I can't, this is why definitive rule books aren't going to give you the one set of rules that's going to ensure that you're met with success everywhere. Writing is rhetorical. We're always writing for a specific purpose to specific audiences. And you're right, you have to figure out who your audience is and write for them. It's not cynical to say that. That's the way all writing works, whether you're in academia or you're in the professional world writing for a boss. But I can say that one way that you can try to anticipate the preferences of a professor is by reading in the field that they're entrenched within. They will tend to see their field, whether let's say you're a history student and then you take a philosophy course, and all of a sudden you go from being a good writer according to your history professors to a not so great writer according to your philosophy professors. It doesn't mean that your writing skills have deteriorated. It means that you are an outsider again, trying to learn the cultural norms to a different community.
Makes
right?
sense. Yes.
You're just an outsider. And guess, I try to think of myself as an expert as much as possible, given that I'm entrusted with this job. But I would have to do the same thing. If you were to say, okay, go and write this engineering lab report, or go help this engineering student write a lab report, tell them how to do it, I would have to do a whole heck of a lot of research to do that, because I'm not in that field.
You saw how Stephanie stepped back from the question about English literature and didn't feel comfortable. I think one of the things that she would say is that there's areas that she does not feel comfortable talking about with expertise knowledge, and you'll see that throughout the university. In our department, we'll have writing instructors who are more firmly embedded within a particular academic discipline, and they'll speak authoritatively on that, and they'll defer, when they don't feel comfortable.
Yeah. But I mean, so pay attention to just practically speaking, when you are reading the course materials assigned by a professor, just take notes. Have in your notebook a running list of type of keywords that they're using. Take note of sentences and sentence patterns. And then what you can do when you go to write an essay for that course is just quickly reread, a page or two of one of those materials, pretend you're that author. Pretend, step into the role, I am this author, and write in their head voice. And you'll sound more like one of them.
That's a great advice. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, I will do that. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
We're all just, we're all just actors on a stage, right?
Great presentation. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great, you're welcome.